everybody. Are you good to go for 30 more minutes before lunch? I have a difficult slot. So can I get a clear yes from the room? Yes. Great, that's a real yes. So I'm John Kostoulas. I am with Gartner for 3 years now as a senior director analyst. I have 20 years in global HR transformation and technology, and it's the first time I speak to an Asian audience. So I hope today that besides providing insights coming from our research and from our daily client interactions, I will learn from you as well about your thoughts on diversity and inclusion, so we will have time for questions at the end. Sounds like a good plan? All right, so let's start with a reality check. So I will ask you to raise your hands. And my first question is, how many of you are comfortable explaining the definitions of diversity and inclusion? If you can raise your hands. So it's nobody really? No? Any more brave takers? All right. So I'll move then to that first. First things first. So diversity is about any characteristic that can differentiate an individual or a team from another. So it could be numbers of things. Some of them are obvious and visible, some of them are not. So it could be race and ethnicity. It could be gender and sexual orientation. It could be culture and beliefs. It could be physical or mental ability. It could be the way we are thinking or we are making decisions. So all sorts of things. And diversity is not just about accepting them, is also about taking into account the individual contributions and perspectives of an individual or group. Inclusion, on the other side, is a state of being respected, valued, and supported. So it is about making everybody feel safe and feel part of the team and putting everything in place to ensure that each member of the team is working to their fullest potential. So now that we've got the definition sorted and everybody's on equal footing, let me ask you another question. How many of you believe that in your organization there should be something happening for D&I, but you don't know where to start? Anybody can raise your hands? So a few of you. Let me then ask, who has already something happening on diversity and inclusion in your organizations? So, bit more, but still wondering what happens with the middle part. So how many of you believe there should be more happening in your organization in D&I? Okay, there is a good number of you on that one. So we will definitely touch upon all three topics. We will discuss why it matters, what you can do, and also how technology can help. But I believe in the room there should be some skeptics that would also ask, why does this really matter? And why does it matter in a business perspective? So I know that it's probably the right thing to do, or it makes sense, but does it make business sense? And some of you have probably read research or articles correlating diversity and inclusion with business performance, but I'll move you a couple of levels down. So to the actual molecule of the organization. So if you don't have this right, then the organization doesn't perform. And this is the team. So this is the study we did 2 years ago, and we researched a very good number of teams, about 2,700 and their managers. And we asked them to rate the team's performance. And then we classified the results according to the diversity, and that was gender diversity, and according to their inclusion score. So if you see the results now, and you see left-hand side is gender diversity, then the other side is high gender diversity, so low, high gender diversity, and we have inclusion as well. When we have low gender and high gender diversity without inclusion, you see the result doesn't really change. Right? So we are moving from 2 to 2.05, not really much. When we have low gender diversity with high team inclusion, the result doesn't change. But see where the magic happens. When you have high gender diversity, with high inclusion, then you have a leap of about 30%. So the average performance moved from 2 something to 3. So the point is that both diversity and inclusion matter. So doing one doesn't really make too much business sense. A similar study we did a few months ago with IT and technology professionals. And we asked again team managers to rate their teams on a 1 to 7 scale on a number of outcomes. So when we ask them, do you believe the quality of your team's work is high? Then the managers with diverse and inclusive teams, actually 86 of them, had their teams at the lowest, at the highest point, so a 6 and a 7. And this is, the comparison is with high diversity, low inclusion, and that was a 54, and none of the two, and that was a 39. And when we ask them, what about new products and ideas? How's your team performance on that? The score jumps even higher. So 90% of them would have a 6 and a 7 versus 49, so you see it's almost double, without inclusion, and 39 without any of those. So both diversity and inclusion matter. But then the next question would be, so who is the team? So this is the board, all right? So this is definitely one team, and I guess it's a no-brainer that it has to be diverse and inclusive because they are making crucial business decisions, right? Yet still, we are seeing a vast number of cases where the board looks like this. I don't know whether this picture really comes from a board, but the point is that it looks like this. But what about these teams? So anybody from retail here? Anybody from consulting? Hospitality? Anybody from technology? All right. So you see, these are teams that could be your retail operations, that could be your consulting, that could be the product team, that could be the hospitality team. And they matter too. So first of all, they get in contact with your customers. So that's why they matter. The other thing is that they are making a lot of decisions on a daily basis. And that's the other reason why they matter. And because of the pace of business moving really faster and faster and faster, if they don't make many decisions, then you are slow as an organization and somebody else can be faster. Or you are less agile as an organization and somebody else is faster. So that's why if that is your board and makes decisions, then these guys are your mini board. And they need to be inclusive and they need to be diverse. And this leads to one of our strategic planning assumptions. So this is one of our top 10 predicts for this year. So what we are saying is that through 2022, which is 3.5 years from now, 75% of organizations with frontline decision-making teams, so the folks you've seen before, having diversity and a culture of inclusion will exceed their financial targets. Why is that? Because these guys will be more involved, will have more discretionary effort, and if they have to make the decision, then they are equipped to make that decision. So obviously you have to align them behind the strategy, because otherwise it's not consistent. But at the end of the day, these people are going to be the ones to make the difference, and only then they will surprise your top or bottom line positively. So let's move to also to what makes a great team. And back to our example with your technology teams or consulting teams or hospitality teams or any teams in the front line. I see in many organizations they are obsessed with just gender diversity, and obviously that's a great starting point, right? But is it the only thing we need? So if we have a team that needs to make a decision, and I'm telling you it's 50-50, men and women, is this enough? So can you really predict whether they will produce a good decision? Anybody who says, yes, I can do that? Anybody who's unsure about this? Okay, so I'll get the second that you are still trying to find your ways out. So the point is that we need more types of diversity to get an inclusive team. So when we lock a team in a room and we want them to produce a decision, then what matters a lot is the way they think. So some people will get all the data and they will say, now that's my viewpoint. Few others will get the feelings. Sorry, I moved too fast. And that's how they will decide. Others will interact and say what their next colleague thinks about that. And then it's also the way they would react, the way they would collaborate to make a decision. So inclusive teams require both obvious types. This means obvious types would be ethnicity, race, that would be gender, that would be age, but also non-obvious aspects of diversity in order to be able to meet the decision-making criteria which will eventually affect business performance. And then, I guess, by now you will say, that's probably a lot for me to do. So you are telling me now that I need to focus on all the teams, I need to do diversity and inclusion, I also need more types of diversity, that's too much. So where do I start? Is it just enough to tell people that D&I is good, it makes business sense, and then they get on and do that? Is it enough? Do you believe it's enough? Anybody who believes it's all right, we can just go along and do that? And you're right. So the point is, why is that? Because in all people decisions, you've got bias. So the way we are hiring, the way we're developing, the way we are promoting people, there is bias in all this. And some of the bias is unconscious. So imagine you have a candidate who comes in and says, look, I've seen your LinkedIn profile and we have been in the same university. Don't you feel differently about this candidate now? Would this affect your decision? Possibly yes. So the good news is that, and neuroscience says this, that we have a part of the brain that can make decisions based on data. What we just need to do is to activate it and use it more. So what this means is that as a foundation for everything we do, we need to contain bias by activating data-driven decision-making. So how we make more decisions based on data rather than intuition. If that starts to happen, and starts to happen consistently in the organization, and this is something that requires CEO support, then that's a great start. And I spoke about CEO support because I often meet teams, HR teams that come and say, you know what, nobody really cares about what I'm doing on D&I because they believe it's HR stuff. So the starting point is to involve your CEOs and to make sure they understand it's not HR stuff. So this is a framework that, and I know this will need some time to absorb, so you will get the presentation anyhow, so you can take a second or third look, so no rush. This is a framework we developed over a number of years, and it points to scalable D&I enablement. So how do I start and how do I make sure that diversity and inclusion comes to my front line? Because eventually that's a destination to reach all levels of the organization. So the first part on the left and on the right is, does everybody understand why it matters? And the other part is, how do we perform? Because this is also important. If you don't measure, then you don't know. So these two, so number one, awareness, and number four, outcome, are the things to ensure they are consistently done, because you have newcomers in the organization and you will not get everything right first time. So it will take you a number of iterations to get to something that's really good. Now, the middle part, input and decision, have to do with the way you're really containing bias and you are enabling the data-driven part of your brain, of everybody's brain. So when we are making hiring decisions, or where we are making promotion decisions, or where we are making any decisions, the point is, do we have the right data and only those, without data noise? And whether we are presenting the data to the decision maker in a way that really helps them to make the decision. And then the bottom part is where inclusion comes into place. As we said, just diversity is not enough. So inclusion comes when we develop inclusive leaders, so leaders, team leaders, the molecule of the organization that really understand why it is important. They're able to tell this to their team members and be a living example. When we track the current state of inclusion, meaning we know what people think of inclusion and how they adopt it inside the organization. And finally, when we embed this in daily decisions. So if the team, which is locked up in a room to produce a decision, doesn't really practice it every day, then it won't happen. And obviously, for many organizations, it's fairly easy to start at small scale. So say you're doing this for your board or for your management team or your 200 top leaders, then it can be fairly easy. But what happens if you have some thousands of people and you need to develop this kind of action? And what we are seeing is that it's quite tough to do this without technology. So technology is an important factor to be able to scale your diversity and inclusion interventions. So how technology can help? So over the years, we have developed a number of use cases. And at the end of the day, the collective objective is how we can make things more transparent. Because if processes are transparent, then this means that people believe in them. How we can make accountability to go higher, because when people feel they are on the hook, then they also are more like they want to make sure they have the right evidence to make the decision. And finally, how we make processes efficient, because otherwise speed matters today. So don't be obsessed with all the vendors or all the use cases. You will see them also in the slides afterwards. But I want to draw your attention in some key facts. So we have a number of processes where we see a lot of traction in diversity and inclusion. Recruiting is one of those. Learning and development, compensation, and career planning. And we also have some fundamental cross-process elements. So cross-process would be the need for you to create social communities so that you engage people with D&I. The need to have learning content on bias awareness so that people know there is bias, even though they cannot see it. To have a competency framework as well, because this is the building block for any talent process. And finally, to have some reporting and analytics to be able to measure. So one very popular case is compensation, pay equity. So are men and women paid the same? In recruitment, things would start from the job description. So do we include the right criteria? Do they meet the typical performance norms of high performers? Then it would be using assessments to create more data points, so not just using the gut feeling of the hiring manager. Do we use anonymized profiles so that people do not get distracted by the gender, the ethnicity, or the photo of an applicant? Do we use also different recruiting channels where we can see how much they contribute to get diverse candidates in? So these are some of the use cases, not an exclusive list. This is growing quite fast. If I move into performance and goal management, you will see that some of the things, particularly in performance management, are simple. So putting the performance criteria into the form or putting the performance process and explain this to your employees are things you can practically do today. You might not need new technology investments. You might just need to use more intelligently the technology you just got. And a few other things is obviously to have managers and employees to provide evidence when they do performance, so that we have a data-driven process, or to provide continuous feedback. All these are signs to be able to make performance and goals and an inclusive process. And then with career development and succession planning, you can do development recommendations. So there are solutions that can provide personalized recommendations. You can also anonymize the succession profile. You can also provide predictive analytics to show you who could be a good successor for somebody else. And then, very important, when people do the extra mile for development and around inclusion, do not forget to recognize them. So I'll leave you with few recommendations. So the first thing is to, first of all, start by understanding where each of the processes, recruiting, development, career, and succession, is at the moment around D&I. So you need an assessment, you need a starting point. When it comes to technology, then you will also need a support roadmap. This means few things you can do today with the technology you've got. In some other cases, you might need to buy new technology. And when you buy new technology, then these are criteria to include as well. So I see too often in technology assessments, functional criteria, so how this would help your talent acquisition, but I don't see how this would help D&I. So do not forget to include that. And finally, this is not going to be a one-stop journey. You're going to start the journey on D&I, you're going to then get some preliminary results, you will tweak, and then again you will do again, and so on and so forth. So, and also very quick for anybody, is anybody here a technology provider? So somebody who provides technology solutions. So few of you are. So make D&I one of your priorities of your roadmap. Make sure you have somebody in product management who puts the whole picture together. Speak to your clients, have this as a dialogue because they are doing a number of things. And finally, if you're doing something on D&I, tell them. I see too many vendors who do things on D&I but forget to tell this explicitly to their clients. So if you are Gartner clients, there is a ton of research we are creating and many new things to come up very shortly. So you can always take a look. And as I say, we can do a couple of questions now, and I'll stay as well if you want to speak to me after the session. And then I'll be around for the full day, and for the next 2 days in Singapore. In case any of this doesn't work, then please do not hesitate to get in touch with me at john.kostoulas@gartner.com. So thank you very much for your attention, and I think we have some time to take few questions.
In one of your slides, you said we should track the inclusion in the company, right? How exactly should we track it? Like,
yeah.
Also including like non-obvious diversity threats that you mentioned.
There are a number of ways. The most prevalent is voice of the employee. So the basic question is, what is the perception around inclusion in the organization? So do people feel the organization is inclusive, and what is missing? Because this is as equally important as the actual data. So people need to feel the organization is inclusive, because otherwise they cannot do the extra mile. Does this help? Excellent. Please. I'll give you mine, and then I'll take it back.
Thanks for the presentation, by the way. It's fantastic. You mentioned as well, just to build out on the gentleman's questions, so one of the key metrics is track D&I programs to promote diversity and inclusions is to track pay disparity, and you mentioned about a survey to our employees if they feel the team is diverse enough. Is there any other metrics, like quantifiable metrics that you can measure the progressions?
Yeah, so obviously there are a few metrics. I see many organizations measuring mainly things like gender diversity, so what is the proportion of men and women. A number of organizations measure this at different career stages. So if you have people entering the company or the workforce now, then what is the progression when they become first-time managers, and how much chance they have to reach the C-suite. So it's also the funnel, how the funnel works. Pay equity is something important. And another thing which I'm seeing some of the organizations are doing to create causation between D&I and business performance is, particularly, say, decentralized organizations, say retail, for example, is to be able to do, it's A/B testing, basically they do. So they will have one unit where they are religious about D&I, and then they would try to see what is the uplift on business performance as opposed to a control unit. So in that case, then you're more able to see what's the effect. So these are some of the examples. There are more we can refer, but obviously the two most popular now is gender and ethnicity statistics. Can we get one last question?
All right, one last question, and then we will have to break for lunch. Otherwise, you guys will probably be hungry for your next session.
Okay, hi. Just curiosity question. Based on your experience, is there any case that which are the D&I didn't work in one another company, especially for the multinational company?
I think there are many cases where it doesn't work when we go back to business performance, because the question is how you actually find out it doesn't work, right? So some of the things I already discussed. So making this just a compliance thing. So making the statistics work, or even worse, put some quotas behind the gender equity, for example, because that does not necessarily affect business performance. Or doing just diversity and forget inclusion, or doing interventions for just few tens of people and not going to the front line. So all these are findings of organizations doing something about D&I, but then the question is, how do I reach the state where D&I really impacts business performance? Because just doing this for the sake of doing this doesn't really bring back the business importance. So, as I said, it's going to be an iterative journey, and then organizations who are doing this journey then keep adding things, and some of the things I already mentioned. And obviously, the main point is to be able to scale D&I, to go to your front line, and therefore, technology comes in place.
Thank
Is
you.
it helpful? Thank you very much, and if anybody has more questions and wants to speak, then I'll be around for some time. So thank you very much again, bon appetit, and good luck with your D&I work.